In 2019, a nurse in Texas claimed she saw something she was never trained to explain. She was working a night shift in a quiet hospital, no visitors, no emergencies, no warning. At exactly 2:17 a.m., security cameras on her floor briefly cut to static. Moments later, she reported seeing a tall figure standing at the end of the corridor. It did not move. It did not speak. But she said its presence filled the room with fear. When questioned later, she gave only one detail, one name she said came to her without thought. A name found in ancient texts, long associated with forbidden knowledge. Azazel. This is not a ghost story. This is a pattern. The name Azazel does not come from folklore or modern horror. It appears in some of the oldest religious writings known to humanity. In ancient Hebrew texts, Azazel is described not as a symbol, but as an entity. One associated with exile, corruption, and forbidden influence. In the book of Leviticus, Azazel is linked to the ritual of the scapegoat. A being to whom humanity's sins were symbolically sent into the wilderness. But later apocryphal writings go further. In the book of Enoch, texts removed from most modern Bibles, Azazel is named as one of the Watchers. Entities said to have descended to earth before recorded history. According to these writings, Azazel taught humans knowledge they were never meant to have. The crafting of weapons. The art of warfare. The manipulation of metals and fire. Ancient authors claimed this knowledge led directly to violence, chaos, and the corruption of humanity. Unlike other entities, Azazel was not simply punished. He was erased. His story removed, fragmented, and buried across forbidden texts. His name survived only in whispers and warnings. This is why Azazel is often described not as a demon of temptation, but as a teacher of destruction. A being whose influence reshaped civilization itself. And yet, despite attempts to erase him from history, the name Azazel continues to resurface. In moments of conflict, suffering, and unexplained encounters. Which raises a disturbing question. If Azazel was only a myth, why does his story keep repeating itself? Ancient texts do not describe Azazel as a destroyer by force. They describe him as something far more dangerous. A teacher. According to the Book of Enoch, Azazel introduced humanity to knowledge that permanently changed civilization. He taught the forging of blades, the shaping of armor, the creation of weapons designed not for survival, but for war. Other entities were said to teach language, medicine, or astronomy. Azazel taught humans how to kill more efficiently. But the knowledge did not stop there. Ancient writers claimed he also taught manipulation. How to deceive. How to dominate. And how to turn desire into control. This knowledge, they believed, accelerated humanity's descent into violence. Wars became larger. Cruelty became systematic. And power became something to be taken, not earned. This is why Azazel was feared more than other watchers. Not because he demanded worship, but because his influence spread silently. Unlike temptation, forbidden knowledge cannot be undone once learned. According to these texts, the punishment for Azazel was extreme. He was bound, cast into darkness, and deliberately erased from collective memory. Not destroyed, but removed from history. Ancient scribes believed that even speaking his name carried risk. That remembering Azazel was enough to invite his influence back into the world. This deliberate erasure explains why his story survives only in fragments. Scattered across forbidden manuscripts. Hidden translations. and censored passages. And yet, despite thousands of years of suppression, the same patterns continue to appear. Sudden advancements, unexplained violence, and encounters that leave witnesses disturbed, but unable to explain why. Which leads to a troubling possibility. What if Azazel was never meant to be worshipped, but avoided? And what if his influence never truly left? Ancient texts rarely describe Azazel appearing at random. They describe patterns. According to these writings, Azazel manifests in places where human suffering reaches its peak. Battlefields, epidemics, and environments saturated with fear, pain, and death. During periods of prolonged war, historical records often mention unexplained figures seen near conflict zones. Silent observers, standing apart from the fighting, not participating, but watching. Some scholars believe this aligns with Azazel's role as a teacher rather than a warrior. A being drawn not to chaos itself, but to the consequences of human choices. Plagues and mass illness are another recurring theme. Ancient accounts describe shadowed figures appearing in areas overwhelmed by disease, not causing the illness, but present where despair was strongest. In modern times, this pattern appears to continue. Most notably in hospitals. Hospitals operate at the intersection of life and death. They are places of healing and places of loss. Psychologists note that extreme stress, exhaustion, and grief can produce vivid hallucinations, especially during night shifts. But what unsettles researchers is that many reported encounters share the same details. A tall figure, a sensation of being watched, and an overwhelming feeling of dread without an obvious source. Supernatural theorists argue this consistency suggests something beyond the psychological. They propose that Azazel does not appear physically in the way humans expect. Instead, he may influence perception, allowing himself to be noticed only when conditions are right. Extreme fatigue, isolation, emotional vulnerability. Whether psychological or supernatural, the result is the same. Witnesses report experiences that feel profoundly real and permanently alter their sense of safety. This overlap between stress, environment, and ancient description is what makes modern encounters so difficult to dismiss. Especially when the location matches the patterns recorded thousands of years ago. Brief pause. And in 2019, one of those locations was a hospital in Texas. In late 2019, a registered nurse working a night shift at a hospital in Texas reported an encounter she never made public. Until months later. Her name has never been officially released. Hospital records confirm only that she resigned abruptly after the incident. It happened just after 2:30 a.m. Night shifts are quiet. The kind of quiet where every sound feels amplified. She had been assigned to an older wing of the hospital. Mostly empty. Under renovation. With only one patient on life support. As she walked down the corridor, she noticed something unusual. The security monitors near the nurse's station began to flicker. Static. Brief interruptions. At first, she assumed it was a technical issue. Then she saw movement. At the far end of the corridor, where the lights were dimmest, stood a figure. Tall. Unmoving. Not a patient. Not staff. She described an overwhelming pressure in her chest. As if the air itself had become heavier. When the figure stepped forward, the security cameras froze completely. No signal. No recording. She later said the most disturbing part wasn't the figure's shape, but its face. Human. But wrong. Eyes too focused. Expressionless. As if it was studying her. She claimed the figure never spoke aloud. Yet a name formed clearly in her mind. One word. Azazel. The sensation vanished as suddenly as it appeared. The corridor lights returned to normal. The cameras resumed. No one else on staff reported seeing anything. But the nurse did not finish her shift. Within weeks, she submitted her resignation. She refused interviews, declined psychological evaluations, and reportedly told a colleague only this: "It wasn't there to hurt me. It was there to be seen." And that raises a disturbing possibility. What if Azazel doesn't appear to destroy, but to remind humanity that he was never truly gone? When questions were later raised about the incident, the hospital's response was brief. There was no official report. No recorded anomaly. No documented security failure. Administrators stated that all systems were functioning normally that night. Yet staff members privately confirmed something didn't add up. Security logs from that corridor were incomplete. Several minutes of footage were missing. Not corrupted, but absent. Maintenance reports were quietly updated weeks later. Electrical issues were retroactively noted, despite no prior complaints. The nurse's employment records were also altered. Her departure was listed as routine. No exit interview. No formal reason given. Similar patterns appear in other reported encounters across the United States. Hospitals. Military facilities. Restricted government buildings. Witnesses report strange figures. Equipment failures. And afterward. Silence. Files disappear. Footage is lost. And official explanations arrive quickly. Skeptics argue this is coincidence. A combination of stress, faulty equipment, and bureaucracy. But conspiracy researchers point to a consistent response. Deny. Minimize. Erase. If these encounters were meaningless, there would be no need to hide them. Which leads to an uncomfortable question. Are institutions covering up something they don't understand? Or something they've encountered before? For centuries, Azazel has been labeled a demon. But that label may say more about human understanding than the entity itself. Ancient people lacked the language to describe advanced or unfamiliar phenomena. Anything that defied explanation was framed in spiritual terms. Angels. Demons. Gods. Modern researchers propose a different interpretation. What if Azazel was never a demon, but something interdimensional? A non-human intelligence operating outside our perception of time and space. This theory suggests that ancient watchers were not fallen angels, but entities capable of crossing dimensions. Their descent wasn't spiritual rebellion. It was physical arrival. And the forbidden knowledge they shared. Metallurgy. Weaponry. Advanced techniques. May have been technology, not magic. To ancient civilizations, such knowledge would appear supernatural. Something powerful. Dangerous. And impossible to control. This could explain why Azazel is associated not with fire and torture, but with teaching, observation, and influence. It may also explain why modern encounters don't resemble traditional demonic attacks. There is no possession. No violence. Only presence. And awareness. If Azazel is interdimensional, then hospitals, war zones, and disaster sites make sense. These are places where human consciousness is strained. Where reality feels thin. Moments where perception may be easier to manipulate. So the question becomes: was Azazel condemned because he was evil? Or because humanity was not ready for what he represented? And if ancient people misunderstood these beings, what are we misunderstanding now? The Texas hospital was not an isolated case. When researchers began comparing similar reports across the United States, patterns emerged. Not identical stories, but identical traits. In rural areas outside Nevada, multiple witnesses reported tall, silent figures appearing near restricted desert zones. Always at night. Always without sound. In Arizona, long-haul drivers described moments on isolated highways where their vehicles suddenly lost power. Dashboard screens went dark. Radio signals cut out. Several drivers claimed to see a figure standing just beyond their headlights. Watching. In New Mexico, unexplained blackouts coincided with reports of shadowed forms seen near medical facilities and research centers. Power returned. Reports were dismissed. And no official connection was made. Across these states: Texas, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico. The descriptions remained disturbingly consistent. No aggression. No communication. Only presence. Witnesses described the same sensations. Pressure. Unease. And the feeling of being examined rather than threatened. Different locations. Different professions. Same experience. Skeptics argue coincidence. Believers argue pattern recognition. But one fact remains difficult to ignore. These encounters follow geography, not imagination. And whatever Azazel represents, it appears to be moving. Which leads to the most unsettling question of all. If Azazel truly exists, the most important question is not what he is, but why he appears now. Ancient texts describe his presence during moments of transition. When civilizations approach irreversible change. Periods of war. Rapid technological growth. Moral collapse. Today, humanity stands at another turning point. Artificial intelligence. Autonomous weapons. Unprecedented surveillance. Knowledge once considered forbidden is now freely accessible. Which raises an unsettling possibility. What if Azazel doesn't return to interfere? What if he returns only to observe? To measure how humanity handles the power it was never meant to possess. Some believe these encounters are warnings. Others believe they are evaluations. And a smaller group believes something far more disturbing. That Azazel never left at all. That he simply learned how to remain unseen. If ancient texts were right, Azazel does not come to destroy humanity. He comes to watch us fall. So the real question is this. If Azazel is watching, what does he see when he looks at us now? If you want to uncover more forbidden stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week, we explore ancient mysteries, modern encounters, and the secrets some wish would remain hidden. Like, share, and stay alert, because the truth is closer than you think.